Welcome back, Vectrekkers. I have an exciting update to the 4th stage on Alpine Rescue. I introduced it in my last video, and I had some very valid criticism that was provided to me mostly through private messaging. Art's subjective, but I feel like we can get to something that's more mutually enjoyable. And so that's what I started to work at. Now, if you remember at the very beginning, I started with this prototype where I had these 3D mountains you're sort of flying over, mountain peaks. And it was a pseudo 3D. It wasn't perfect, but I thought, well, let me go with that further, and I made it look like mountains. I tried to make mountains peeking through clouds, and your helicopter could go up and down. And it seemed exciting, but it was heavy on the processor. So going with a more topographical approach, I went with this style where you have lines that light up at different levels, and the topographical lines parallax, giving you a feeling of flying over 3D. But there were criticisms. So for inspiration, I went back to some old games like River Raid, a 1982 game, same as Vectrex. And River Raid is a top-down flying game where you have bridges. I thought, bridges are an interesting element. You can crash into them. What would it be like to fly under them? And then I also looked at Captain Skyhawk, which is a very underrated game made by the Rare Studios, published by Milton Bradley, just like the Vectrex, right? The MB. In 1989, this came out. I had it on my Nintendo as a kid. And I remembered it had cool overhead flying stages. So let's look at that. So you see this kind of isometric view, and you have mountains and trees that are triangular, very triangular, this whole game. But it was cool. It had a nice feeling. You could go up and down with your jet. If you're going down, you were kind of shooting at the ground. Had different stages, super fast stages where you're sort of dogfighting. It had stages where you're flying over volcanoes and a desert. And it had different modes. So not only are you shooting things and dodging things, but you also have to swoop down and deliver things. Maybe like deliver packages in one mode. In another mode, you are rescuing a scientist. And by rescuing the scientist here, this is the stage where you're rescuing a scientist, and he gets in your plane, and you take off. And you get the first half of the secret weapon. So you're trying to defeat these aliens that have invaded. It had dogfighting mode, like a Top Gun style flying with missiles. It even had like a space station docking mode. It also had a mode where you're doing upgrades, upgrading your equipment. So, I realized that a lot of this kind of went into maybe my inspiration for the game from the very beginning that I didn't even think about. Some subconscious inspirations going on here. And of course, we talked last week about how Thunderblade for the arcade inspired me to get this kind of parallax up and down movement. So I went back to the drawing board, basically took what I had of the code and updated it to where you're flying over sort of a river raid, going over and under bridges. So I thought, let's see if I can go under a bridge. I want the helicopter to disappear, like that. And that was the first stage of this prototype. And then I decided to make it look more like a canyon going down inside. And then I made these trees because I was trying to imagine what would an evergreen tree look like. And that's what I came up with. When my son played this, he thought the trees, the way they kind of move and parallax, to him it looked like a turret or some kind of a cannon, which is not the intention. Other than that, though, I liked how things were shaping up. I had coins at different levels. I had the birds still. A lot of it had not changed much. This was more of a visual change. But being able to make the helicopter disappear in the way it parallaxes the cliffs. So this brings us to the final version that I've got right now that I want to introduce to you. Keep all the things you just saw in mind. And I also had a criticism about the helicopter look. So now try to make spinning blades on it. They're not perfect. And you'll notice the helicopter sound gets quieter the deeper into the canyon you go, and louder the higher up you fly. As you can see, we changed the tree model. There's a tree down there. There's a trunk that's a slightly faded out version of it. And then the other issue was with the highlighting. I tried highlighting different levels. You were at different levels, but that was really distracting when I have different lines highlighting. So the way it is now is as your helicopter goes down to the bottom of the cliff, it actually fades out. And when you're higher up, it fades in brighter. So the brightness increases and decreases based on how high you are. Now my camera makes it look all very similar, but my camera just auto brightens things, so it's hard to see how dim it gets, but the bottom of the canyon is actually fairly dim. And you can crash into bridges as well as flying under them. But yeah, you got this, the cliffs kind of parallax, so it looks like it goes down deeper. When you go too far to the left or right, the cliff will actually disappear on the left or right. The bottom of the ravine disappears. That's kind of where we're at this moment. Stay tuned. We got some exciting things coming. I'm just about wrapping this part up, and then it's going to be putting in a lot of new variety, adding gameplay and fun, and just trying to really tighten the screws on this.